Welcome. We're here today with Sheila Miller, one of our IBM resources, and we're going to talk about something you might not think of as an IBM topic, but we'll find out why it is. So I've heard about ESG enough to know that it stands for environmental, social, and governance. But what does that mean for a real organization, and what does IBM bring to the table in that framework?
Well, IBM has several tools, but most recently they've acquired a software product called Envizi, and that is in this sustainability realm and more about your GHG emissions, which is greenhouse gas emissions. And because they wanted to get on board with the future of work, the SEC has required that all public companies report their GHG emissions. And that's your greenhouse gas emissions and your carbon footprint. And that's what Envizi does. It has templates to help you do that. It also gives you a score. As you see, ESG scores, the higher the score, the more sustainable you are. And that's the way corporations are going into the future.
And that's actually one of the big things because there's what the government tells you to do. In this case, you've got to report carbon footprint, et cetera. But ESG really goes well beyond that. And obviously, anything that's beyond what you have to do has got to have some benefit for those organizations. So why are employers, large companies, taking this ESG approach to things? What benefits do they really get out of it?
Well, that's a good question because um, a lot of times companies think it's a waste of money. But they found that there's $12 trillion worth of benefits to the company that's out there. And that's beyond the fact that a lot of CEOs are looking for a more sustainable footprint because they're being pressured by their investors to, be a environmentally conscious company, as well as globally, 49% of consumers will pay a premium for sustainable goods, as well as 7 in 10 employees would stay with a company if they were environmentally conscious.
Mhm.
So as you can see, not only socially does it affect the company, but it also affects their bottom line as well, because being sustainable and maintaining your equipment and being carbon conscious and even in your IT footprint, there is a return on your investment. And most CEOs realize that they can capture that investment within 5 years.
That's a great turnaround pretty much on any kind of an investment. And one of the things that we've seen, especially over the last couple of years, there's been an increased amount of mobility with employees, let's put it that way. And if anything you can do to retain the right talent, obviously is going to give you an advantage. And if it goes beyond just retaining, but able to attract new talent because of those same movements, I got to imagine that's better than a lot of other benefits traditionally organizations have used to hire in new talent.
That's correct. It is. And it also, if you take it to the transactional level, you will see that return on your investment. And using software offered by IBM, it will help you in those endeavors. Because a lot of CEOs, a lot of companies, where do I start? Where do I get the data? How do I compile the data? What do I have to report? And what would give me a benefit for my business as usual?
So why don't you give us a setup, give us a little bit background around the approach, ESG in general, and then what we have as a toolkit with Envizi.
Okay, we could do that with the slides. Invizi leaves you with templates and a roadmap as to how to not only be compliant but get you to your future state. It's measured in 3 different scopes, and these are 3 different types of emissions. Scope 1 is your direct carbon footprint. In the process of making, if using a manufacturing example, the process of making any goods, what electricity is consumed, what fuel is being burned, so forth and so on. Scope 2 emissions are indirect. What are your resources and raw materials that you consume that creates an additional footprint?
Mhm.
those are required by the SEC to report as scope 1 and scope 2. You do not have to report scope 3, but you're going to find that your ROI is you get the most return on your investment by utilizing scope 3 emissions, and that's any indirect emissions. For instance, now with a lot of companies are going to the remote work or work from home model, the emissions that you're saving from your employees not traveling to work comes into play with scope 3. And that can be reportable from within Envizi.
So when we talk about this, I mean, scope 2 is that to me is, well, scope 1 is what I'm doing. Scope 2 is supply chain, so stuff that I'm buying. And there's a lot of arguments and fear, uncertainty, and doubt, let's call it, with EV electric vehicles, for example.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions about how sustainable is that supply chain. And then really when you're talking scope 3, that's a lot of the employee associate kind of experiences, to your point about the drive to work. And we've heard that argument even before work from home and remote work got to be more common, about things like larger cities trying to do like staggered starts and changes in the work week, just to reduce the amount of traffic just sitting there, for example.
Yes, scope 3 comes in 2 categories, upstream and downstream. And as you can see, capital goods could even be a part of that. Let's say you provide coffee for your employees. Anything that you could or could not have direct control over.
So really, this is a great example of really, really hard to track. But we were talking earlier, it sounded like if you can track this might show you a really good return that might offset some challenges in some of those other areas.
Absolutely. They say 55% of your ROI can be found in your scope 3 emissions.
All right, let's keep going with the description.
Okay, so then we get to, there's a 3-step approach on how you get to your end goal. And one is you have to define the sustainability strategy and roadmap, and that comes with Envizi. It can give you a lot of tools to do that with. It gives you templates, tells you where you can seek your data. IBM also has some service offerings that will come to your company and will do that for you to help you reach that goal. Then you're going to establish baselines. So you want to say, well, this is where it should be at based upon an industry standard, because obviously, let's say a pulp mill would have a different industry standard versus a retail manufacturing site. And then you also evaluate what your risk is and how to manage it. And then you get to the 3 where you have, this is your implementation stage or operational stage, what they call it. And also this 2 and 3, you get into what's called your compliancy stage, where you can actually report to the SEC what your GHG emissions are. And in these 3 categories down here, number 3 is where you're going to find IBM can supply those goals as well with their other software offerings.
Now, just a quick question. One of the things that comes up occasionally, and I usually use like security audits as an example. You mentioned some IBM service offerings around that. Professional services is very core to IBM. Is there, either from a reporting standpoint, even just from a PR standpoint, any benefit to having an outside agency involved at some point, whether maybe not necessarily with some of your initial planning, but as you start to get into that compliance, to be able to say, this is what we were reporting, and we've had this third party service provide that information versus it's our own accounting?
That's a good point, because exactly that. There are several other compliance agencies that will come and check your footprint for you and look at your data and assess if you're doing a good job, or where there might be some holes, to say, if you did this or looked at that, that would help you reach your goals. Here are the offerings from IBM to cover each one of these areas. Envizi starts up here, but then down at, when you have intelligent assets, what is that? People say, if you've ever heard of IoT, Internet of Things, that's considered an intelligent asset. It is reading back to a central suppository, a database somewhere where you can capture your data. And the two offerings they have for facilities and infrastructure is IBM Maximo and IBM Tririga. Maximo is an asset management system where you have Internet of Things, sensors in your buildings, and maybe have a camera pointed at a machinery, or even for truck or vehicle maintenance. And it will automatically generate work orders to go out there and like to maintain it, change the oil, take it for inspection. Something's broken down, it can tell you from a camera's point of view. You don't have to have personnel right there to be inspecting your assets constantly. That's what Maximo will do for you. IBM Tririga is a building and real estate management type of offering. And again, it works with sensors and can tell you, oh, you have a conference room that holds 20 people, but you only have 5 in there. It can literally pick up sensors and how many people are, so you can have office utilization, conference room utilization. It also can measure, heat. It's 75 degrees in there. It can lower the heat or increase the temperature or turn on the air conditioning in a cost-efficient way. On the responsible computing, because even though we think of, well, if it's on the computer, we're sustainable, right? We're already green. Not necessarily if you're not using your computer system in a more efficient manner. Less cloud use. We do have the cloud, which obviously, removes the, I don't want to say ability, but removes the liability of you having an on-site data warehouse. Mm-hmm. You can use a cloud, and that way it's in a place that's already set up for that type of infrastructure.
So in our framework, cloud is moving a zone 1. Is it zones that we talk about? Something in your data center is your direct footprint. Something in a cloud is secondary.
Yes. And you do want to...
Scope is the word I was trying to get.
Yes. It's what you do. But that would be, it's still, even if you had on-site, let's say on-premise software instead of in the cloud, it's still scope 2 because it doesn't directly fold into your product. Scope 2 is what you have in-house, but it doesn't create a product at the end of the day. Like having a computer system wouldn't create that chair. Let's say I produce chairs.
It sounds a lot more complicated than I thought. I hope that there's software solutions that help me figure this out.
Well, and that's what Envizi does for you. And even I get them confused. And it might be a part of scope 1. It could be one or the other. And once it becomes the IM cloud, it could even be considered either scope 2 or scope 3, depending on what type of interaction that has with your footprint. But it's still counted. It's just a matter of, that's why Envizi software was invented, so that it can help and direct you and roadmap you. Plus, you also have the ability, like I said, of IBM services, where they have industry experts that have come, have done this already for other companies, knows your industry specifically in order to be able to help you with those decisions. And again, what IBM does in the cloud for you is maybe you're not optimizing your disk space. Maybe your network isn't running gigabits, or your network is so shared that you don't have the most efficient IT setup. Whereas because it's in the cloud, you have other people maintaining that software for you and administering that software for you. They can tell you the most efficient way because they have the experience under their belts. And turbonomics is an IT network type efficiency monitoring control of your software, where you can see packets and networking and any delays or latencies within your network, and that would help you with that. And then over on the supply chain side, you have Sterling Order Management, which is like B2B software where you can bring in orders and it automatically goes into your database without having people typing it in. And Supply Chain Intelligence Suite comes with some of that as well. Also, comes with weather data.
Mhm.
So let's say, here in Buffalo, we all know about weather, right? So I always tell everybody we measure snow here in feet, not inches. And if there's a snowstorm coming up and you know that the temperature is going to get down really low, oh, okay, so we need snow plows to plow out the driveways. We need to make sure the temperature is warm enough to sustain the building, so forth and so on. Those are available through the weather
Mhm.
app and database.
And that's not necessarily something that people would think of, but when we look at it from this larger framework, all of that, you mentioned things like some of the IoT solutions, building management, those kind of things. And one of the things I thought of is, well, if we don't have that conference room scheduled, why should we be heating it or cooling it?
Exactly.
And if we know the performance of our HVAC, I know that if I've got a meeting there at 2 o'clock, at 12:30, I need to bring it up to a certain temperature, and that, or down, depending on whether we're heating or cooling, and that may even be affected by the number of people coming in. We've all been into those areas where they cool it for 100 people, and you got 10 people in there, and everybody's freezing.
Right.
So
Right.
it
Exactly.
goes beyond just kind of the basics where we get a lot more detailed, and the question is usually about, well, what's the benefit of doing that? Well, what am I saving a couple of pennies in energy cost? But when we look at it in this larger framework, it actually has a lot more impact than when we look at it as against the specific cost, because it contributes to the overall sustainability of the organization.
Correct. And it also reports it in financials that are um, solid framework, right? Everyone wants to look at the bottom line, and unless it hits the general ledger, we don't necessarily consider it. But this reports it in financial language
Mhm.
that is easily accessible as well as very user friendly to let you know how much you are saving from the bottom line. And it shows it in black and white, which is nice. And you mentioned the buildings, and that's where Tririga can interplays with Maximo as
Mhm.
well. And that's what's nice with IBM offering these tools. Since purchasing Envizi, they're building the hooks to interact with everything as well. So pretty soon you can get Envizi by itself for the templates and for the roadmap. But then if you want to take it further, you'll have the ability to roll right into any of these other offerings and have the hooks automatically there for you.
All right. Well, as always, thank you very much for your time, Sheila. And if we had one thing that you really wanted as a takeaway for our audience today, what would really that be?
That would be, this is the future of work. This is where companies are going. And to be more profitable, as well as allow IBM to help you on your journey to get there. Remember, it's people, profit, and the planet.